Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." These words sound simple, yet anyone who has really tried knows how heavy they are. Because to become yourself is not to put on another mask or chase after some shining image of perfection. It is to strip away illusions, one after another, until what remains is something raw, unpolished, and deeply alive. From childhood, you are handed roles: the obedient student, the good son, the clever daughter, the reliable friend. Without even knowing it, you begin to shape yourself around these expectations. You learn when to smile, when to stay quiet, when to say the words that make others nod in approval. This is how the persona forms, the mask that allows you to move through the world. It is useful, even necessary. But if you mistake the mask for your true identity, you begin to feel hollow. You laugh, but the laughter feels borrowed. You succeed, yet the success tastes empty. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispers, "This is not really me." Beneath the mask waits the shadow. Not the monster under the bed, but the parts of yourself you were told not to show. The anger you swallowed. The tears you hid. The wild impulses you locked away because someone once said, "Good people do not feel this." But the shadow is not only darkness. Within it hides your unclaimed strength, your silenced creativity, the fire you were too afraid to let burn. Everything you refuse to face in yourself gathers there. And it waits. Most people spend their lives running from it. They point to others and call them selfish, cruel, weak, without seeing that these are reflections of what they fear in their own hearts. Jung called this projection the casting of your denied shadow onto the world around you. But the shadow does not vanish simply because you push it away. It lingers in your dreams. It twists your moods. It knocks at the door when life is quiet, and sometimes it breaks through when you least expect it. To walk toward your true self, you must turn to face the shadow. This is not an easy descent. It feels like betrayal of the image you built. It feels like danger. And in a way it is. Because once you see what you truly are, you cannot go back to pretending. But within that darkness lies a seed of light, a forgotten piece of your wholeness. And when you gather the courage to hold it, something in you begins to heal. Jung saw the unconscious not as a pit of chaos, but as a vast inner landscape, filled with symbols, archetypes, patterns older than your own life. In dreams it speaks. In sudden images, in myths that echo across cultures, it shows its face. A dream of falling, a vision of water, an encounter with a stranger in a dream, these are not accidents. They are fragments of the deeper self trying to reach you. They come not to confuse you, but to guide you. And here the ego resists. The ego loves control. It clings to order, to the known, to the familiar story of who you are. To let go, even slightly, feels like death. And in a way, it is the death of the old image. Yet Jung believed this collapse was necessary. Because only what is false can fall away. And when it does, what remains is the beginning of something real. The self, in Jung's language, is not the little I that worries about status and reputation. It is the deeper center that unites the conscious and the unconscious. It is the ground of your being, the root from which your life grows. To touch it is to feel, perhaps for the first time, that you belong to yourself. Not to the mask. Not to the demands of others. But to something eternal that has lived in you all along. The journey is long. It comes in symbols, in synchronicities, in sudden insights that change the direction of your life. It comes when suffering cracks the shell of who you thought you were. It comes when you begin to realize that meaning cannot be handed to you, it must be found within. Those who dare to walk this path do not emerge perfect. They still feel pain, doubt, longing. But their lives no longer feel counterfeit. They stand rooted in something deeper. Their laughter carries weight. Their silence feels full. They live in alignment with the self, and in that alignment, there is a strength no mask can ever give. This is where the journey begins, with honesty, with the courage to face the shadow, and with the willingness to be broken open. Only then does the light of the true self begin to rise. Once the shadow is faced, the journey does not end. In fact, for Jung, this was only the beginning. To integrate the shadow is to admit that you are larger than the mask you wear. But beyond this confrontation lies another threshold, the world of archetypes, the timeless patterns that shape human life from the inside out. Jung discovered these patterns by studying myths, religions, and dreams from every corner of the world. He saw that no matter the culture or the language, people dreamed in the same symbols. A hero setting out on a dangerous quest. A wise old man offering guidance. A mother who nourishes or devours. A trickster who disrupts the order. These figures were not invented by culture alone. They emerged from the deep structure of the psyche itself. To find your true self, you must come into dialogue with these archetypes. They are not just stories in books, they live in you. When you feel drawn to risk everything for a vision, the hero stirs within you. When life feels dark and empty and a dream shows you a figure of light, the wise guide is speaking. When chaos erupts unexpectedly, the trickster has entered. Each archetype is a mirror. They reveal not only your struggles, but also the shape of your becoming. Jung believed that dreams were one of the purest doorways to this deeper reality. A dream might frighten you, or confuse you, or linger for days like a riddle. But if you sit with it, if you write it down, draw it, meditate on it, the symbols begin to unfold. A tower may symbolize ambition or protection. Water may point to the unconscious depths. The stranger in the dream may be a forgotten part of yourself, waiting to return. Each dream is a message, not random noise. And if you follow them patiently, they guide you toward the self. Life itself also brings these symbols through synchronicity. Jung used this word to describe the meaningful coincidences that seem too precise to be chance. A book falls open to the page that speaks to your exact struggle. A stranger says the one sentence you needed to hear. A song plays at the moment when your heart was searching for an answer. These events cannot be measured the way science measures cause and effect, but they carry a sense of meaning that pierces you. To Jung, synchronicities were signs that the inner world and the outer world were aligned, that the self was at work. Yet even with guidance from dreams, symbols, and synchronicities, the path is not smooth. Individuation often feels like disorientation. The ego clings to the familiar while the self calls you forward into the unknown. You may feel caught between two worlds, one that is dying and one that has not yet taken form. This in-between space can be lonely. Old relationships may fall away. Old ambitions may dissolve. At times you may wonder if you are losing yourself, when in truth you are beginning to find yourself. Jung compared this to the ancient myths of descent. Orpheus descending into the underworld. Inanna passing through 7 gates and stripped of all her symbols of power. Christ in the tomb. Each of these stories is a symbol of transformation. Before rebirth, there is descent. Before new life, there is a kind of death. To become your true self, you must allow the old structures to fall away, even when it feels unbearable. And here, patience becomes essential. Jung warned that individuation cannot be rushed. It unfolds in its own rhythm. To force it is to damage it. The unconscious speaks when it is ready. The self emerges when the soil has been prepared. What is required of you is attention, honesty, and the willingness to endure uncertainty. For in the silence of not knowing, the deeper wisdom begins to rise. This middle stage of the journey is perhaps the most fragile. You have glimpsed the shadow. You have begun to see the archetypes move within you. You have felt the strange pull of synchronicity. But you are not yet rooted in the self. The old identity has loosened, the new has not yet taken hold. It is a time of vulnerability, and yet it is also sacred. Because in this space of not knowing, the soul reshapes itself. When you stay with it, when you resist the urge to return to old masks, something remarkable begins to happen. The symbols grow clearer. The inner and outer world begin to align. And slowly, the self reveals itself not as an abstract idea, but as a living presence within you. A center that holds, even when everything else feels uncertain. A ground that cannot be taken away. This is the quiet miracle of individuation. You are not escaping the world. You are not abandoning your humanity. You are becoming more human than ever before. more whole, more alive, more true. As the journey deepens, the task is no longer only to face the shadow or to follow the symbols of the unconscious. It is to live what you have discovered. Jung insisted that individuation was not an abstract theory to be admired from a distance. It was something to embody, to carry into every corner of daily life. Without this embodiment, the self remains only an idea. And an idea, no matter how profound, cannot transform you. When a person begins to live from the self, their life takes on a different texture. Decisions are not made simply to please others, nor to inflate the ego, nor to fit into a role handed down by society. Choices emerge from a deeper center, from a sense of inner alignment. This does not mean the path becomes easy. Often, living authentically means stepping away from comfort. It may mean walking a road that others do not understand. But the difference is felt within. Even when the outer life grows more difficult, the inner life begins to feel whole. This stage often brings conflict. The old identity does not dissolve without resistance. You may feel torn between duty and desire, between who you were and who you are becoming. Relationships may be tested. Work that once felt secure may now feel suffocating. You may wake each morning with a sense of standing on unfamiliar ground. Jung called this tension the conflict of opposites, the clash between the conscious ego and the deeper self. It is tempting to resolve this conflict quickly, to choose one side and push the other away. But Jung taught that the true task is to hold the tension, to endure the discomfort until a new symbol arises that transcends the opposition. This is how transformation occurs. Not by choosing between light and dark, masculine and feminine, order and chaos, but by allowing a deeper synthesis to emerge. In myth, this stage is often symbolized by alchemy. The ancient alchemists spoke of transforming base metals into gold. Jung saw this as a metaphor for psychological transformation. The fire of conflict, the pressure of opposites, the slow patience of inner work, these are the crucible in which the ego is refined. The lead of unconsciousness is burned away. What remains is not perfection, but something rare, something solid, the gold of an integrated self. Dreams at this stage often show images of union. A marriage, a birth, the joining of two figures. These are not literal predictions. They are symbols of inner reconciliation, the masculine and feminine within beginning to recognize each other, the shadow finding its place beside the persona, the conscious mind bowing to the wisdom of the unconscious. Slowly, the scattered pieces of the psyche begin to come together. But integration is not only inward. Jung emphasized that individuation requires participation in the outer world. To find your true self is not to retreat into solitude forever. It is to bring your wholeness into relationship, into work, into love, into community. A person who has begun to live from the self does not withdraw from life. They enter it more deeply, but from a place of authenticity. They speak words that carry weight. They act with a quiet authority that does not come from power or status, but from being aligned with something larger than the ego. And yet, there is no final arrival. The process unfolds through the whole of life. Each new stage brings fresh shadows to face, new opposites to reconcile, new symbols to embody. Individuation is not a destination. It is a rhythm, a lifelong unfolding. But with each cycle, the center grows stronger. The sense of meaning deepens. The alignment with the self becomes more stable. At this point, many feel a shift. They realize that the true self is not only personal. It is also connected to something universal. The archetypes that shape you are not yours alone. The patterns that unfold in your life echo across humanity. To live from the self is to recognize this larger belonging. You are yourself, but you are also part of a greater story. This recognition softens the need for constant control. The ego loosens its grip. Life begins to feel less like a battle to dominate, and more like a dialogue with something greater. You are not only shaping your path, you are being shaped by it. And in this dialogue, the self speaks. To reach this stage is to know both humility and strength. Humility, because you see that you are not the master of life. Strength, because you feel rooted in something deeper than circumstance. This paradox, small and vast at once, individual and universal, is the mark of a person who has begun to embody their true self. As the path continues, a profound shift often begins to stir. The search for the true self is no longer only about integration of the inner world or harmony within relationships. It begins to reach outward, to touch questions of meaning, purpose, and the mysterious ground of existence itself. Jung believed that individuation inevitably leads to a spiritual dimension, not in the sense of adopting a specific faith or doctrine, but in recognizing the presence of something larger that breathes through life. For many, this comes as an experience of awe, a sudden awareness of the vastness of the cosmos, or a quiet moment in which the heart feels connected to all living things. It may come through dreams, through nature, through art, or simply through silence. Jung often described the self as a symbol of wholeness that overlaps with the divine. To move toward your true self is also to move closer to what humanity has for centuries called God, not necessarily as an external being, but as the innermost center of life. This stage can be both liberating and unsettling. To feel part of a larger whole can dissolve the loneliness of the ego. It gives strength to endure suffering, because suffering is no longer seen as meaningless. It becomes part of a pattern, a chapter in a story larger than the individual. Yet at the same time, the immensity of it can be overwhelming. The ego may resist, fearing its own smallness. There is a temptation to cling to rigid beliefs, to capture the mystery in words and symbols, to control what cannot be controlled. But Jung reminded us that the mystery cannot be possessed. It can only be approached with reverence, with openness, with humility. Individuation at this depth requires a new kind of courage. Not the courage to conquer or to defend, but the courage to surrender. To allow the unconscious, the self, and the larger order of life to guide you. This does not mean passivity. It means moving with life rather than against it, listening for its rhythm, trusting that even in darkness, meaning can emerge. Jung drew often on myth to illustrate this stage. In many traditions, the hero's journey does not end with victory in battle. It ends with the hero bringing a gift back to the community. The treasure discovered in the depths is not kept for the self alone. It is shared. This is the mark of maturity in individuation. You no longer seek the true self for your own fulfillment alone. You become a vessel for something larger, offering what you have gained to others. This is why many who walk this path are drawn into acts of creation or service. Some write, some teach, some build, some heal. The form does not matter. What matters is that the life of the self flows into the world. The individual becomes a channel through which archetypal energies, wisdom, compassion, creativity, renewal, can take shape in tangible ways. The inner work turns outward, and the personal journey becomes a gift to the collective. Yet Jung warned that this stage is also dangerous. When the energies of the self are not held with humility, they can inflate the ego. A person may mistake themselves for a prophet, or believe they are chosen above others, or misuse the power that comes with insight. This is the trap of inflation, when the ego identifies with the archetypal and loses its human balance. The antidote is always humility. To remember that the self is larger than you. That you are a participant in the mystery, not its master. In the later chapters of life, this process often brings a new relationship to death. Jung wrote that death is not merely an end but a fulfillment, a completion of the pattern. For one who has lived close to their true self, death is less frightening. It is seen as a passage into the greater whole that has always been present. The boundaries of the ego dissolve, but the meaning of the self endures. To approach life in this way is to live not in fear of endings, but in gratitude for the unfolding. To live from the true self, then, is to live in dialogue with the infinite. It is to move between the ordinary and the eternal, between daily tasks and timeless patterns. It is to recognize that each moment, no matter how small, is woven into a greater design. The coffee poured in the morning, the conversation with a friend, the solitude of the night, all of these can become expressions of wholeness when lived from the center. This is why Jung's vision is not abstract philosophy alone. It is a way of life. It is a call to authenticity, to courage, to humility, to reverence. The path is not simple, and it never ends. But each step toward the true self brings a deeper sense of meaning, and a quieter, steadier peace. To walk the path of individuation to its farthest horizon is to realize that the true self was never something to be constructed. It was always there, waiting to be uncovered. What had to be broken away were the layers of expectation, the masks of persona, the denials of shadow, the illusions of control. What remains is simple, yet it carries the depth of a lifetime. Jung often said that the greatest tragedy is not death, but to live a life that was never truly your own. To die having worn only the costumes that others gave you. To have ignored the voice that spoke softly in dreams, in synchronicities, in quiet intuitions, and instead lived only for approval, for security, for the endless chase of the ego. The true self, once glimpsed, makes this tragedy impossible to ignore. It demands that you live differently. But living differently does not mean withdrawing from the world or casting aside all duties. It means inhabiting them authentically. To speak words that reflect your soul, not just your role. To love in a way that honors both yourself and the other, without the games of possession or fear. To work not only for gain, but to express something of your essence. To face suffering not as punishment, but as part of a deeper unfolding. This is the life of the individuated person, ordinary on the surface, yet luminous beneath. Jung was clear that no one reaches complete individuation. Wholeness is not perfection. It is not the absence of conflict, pain, or doubt. It is the courage to face them honestly, to integrate what can be integrated, and to live in relationship with the mystery that remains. The true self is not a final possession. It is a center you return to again and again, through all changes, through all seasons. In the end, to find your true self is to enter into friendship with your own life. To stop treating it as an enemy to be conquered or a problem to be solved. It is to walk alongside it with trust. To see that even the detours, even the shadows, even the losses, were part of the way. The path is never straight. But it leads always toward wholeness. And perhaps the final gift of this journey is a quiet gratitude. Gratitude for the moments of clarity, for the symbols that guided you, for the people who mirrored your inner truths, for the unseen order that carried you even in the darkest hours. Gratitude not because life has been easy, but because it has been real. This is what Jung wanted us to understand. That to find the true self is not to escape the human condition. It is to embrace it fully, to participate in its mystery, to live it consciously. And in doing so, to touch a wholeness that is both deeply personal and infinitely vast. So the journey ends where it began, with you. Not the you that was shaped by expectation or fear, but the you that has always been waiting beneath the surface. The quiet center, the timeless self, the true heart of your being. To live from this center is the greatest work of a lifetime. And it is a work that begins now, in this moment, with the simple choice to listen inward, and to walk the path with courage.